Good morning, sir. My name is Gaurav Shah and my roll number is 37. And the topic for my presentation today is Interpreter and JIT Compiler. The contents of my presentation are Interpreter, need for Interpreter, Interpreter versus Compiler, JIT Compiler, need for JIT Compiler, and advantages and disadvantages of JIT Compiler. So let us start with our first topic, that is Interpreter. So what is an interpreter? In simple words, an interpreter converts high-level language into machine language. This is the primary job of the interpreter. So now let's look into it into detail. So all high-level languages need to be converted to machine code so that the computer can understand the program after taking the required inputs. Now we all know that the machine does not understand the language that we speak, such as English and Hindi. But the machine does understand its own language, that is a machine code. So the job of the interpreter is to convert this high-level language such as C++, C, Java into machine code, which the machine will understand. The software by which the conversion of the high-level instructions is performed line by line to machine-level language other than compiler and assembler is known as interpreter. So the task that is being done here by the interpreter is also done by compiler and assembler, but there is a difference, and the difference is mentioned here. The interpreter in the compiler checks the source code line by line, and if an error is found on any line, it stops the execution until the error is resolved. This is a specific point which is there in the interpreter. The interpreter will not go through the code at once. It will not execute the code at once like compiler, but the interpreter, it will go line by line, and if there is any error, it will stop there and stop the execution until that error has been corrected. So now let us go to our next topic, that is need for interpreter. The first and vital need of an interpreter is to translate source code from high-level language to machine language, that we have already discussed. If the source code is huge in size, then it might take hours to compile the source code, which will significantly increase the compilation duration. So this is a problem that we face during compilation, that if the source code is huge, then there will be more time that will be taken to compile the code. But the interpreter plays its role here. What role it plays? The interpreter can cut this huge compilation duration. So instead of waiting for the entire code, the interpreter translates a single line and executes it. Now this is because of the fact that interpreter goes through the code or executes the code line by line, which is not done by the compiler. So this is an advantage of using the interpreter. Let us move on to our next topic, that is interpreter versus compiler. So what is the difference? In interpreter, we see that it translates program one statement at a time, and in compiler we see that it scans the entire program and translates it as a whole into machine code. Now we can consider an example in this case. Like, let us suppose there is a restaurant and there are two waiter number 1 and waiter number 2. The waiter number 1 will go to every customer, take their order all at once, and then go to the cook and then give the cook the order, and then the cook will give all the orders to the waiter number 1, and then he or she will go and give the orders to the respective customers. Now this will happen all at once. She will deliver, or he or she will deliver the order at once. She will take the order at once and then deliver all the customers at once. Now let us consider another waiter number 2. The waiter number 2 will go to every customer one at a time, take that order, go to the cook, and then bring that order to that particular customer, then move on to the next customer and do the same thing. Now the waiter number 1 is like a compiler who compiles the code, executes the code at once, and weighted number 2 is like an interpreter who goes through the code line by line, one line at a time. So this is the difference we can understand. So let us discuss other differences. Interpreters usually take less amount of time to analyze the source code. Because interpreters are executing the code line by line, it will take lesser time, but overall the execution time is comparatively slower than compilers because it is going line by line, and wherever there is error it will stop. But in compiler, the compiler usually takes a large amount of time to analyze the source code. However, the overall execution time is comparatively faster than interpreters. So comparatively speaking, for the overall execution, compiler is faster. No object code is generated in the case of interpreter, and therefore memory is very efficient. But in compiler, object code will be generated, and therefore there will be more memory required. So interpreter works in programming languages like JavaScript, Python, Ruby, and the compiler for the programming languages like C, C++, Java. These are the examples. Now let us move on to our next topic, that is JIT compiler. Now JIT compiler is a part of JVM or Java Virtual Machine, and it helps traditional JVM to execute the code faster. Now we have to understand that the source code that is generated when it is to be executed into machine code, before getting executed as a machine code, it has to be converted into an intermediate code which is known as bytecode, and the bytecode has to be converted to the machine code, and then the machine code can be understood by the machine. Now what JIT compiler does is it helps JVM to reduce the delay in executing the bytecode. Now how it helps, let us discuss. The JIT or just-in-time compiler is an essential part of the JRE, Java Runtime Environment, that is responsible for performance optimization of Java-based application system during runtime. So it helps in the performance optimization. The bytecodes have to be interpreted or compiled to proper machine instructions depending on the instruction set architecture. So we have to interpret or compile the bytecode into machine code. That is a task for the JVM. So in order to improve performance, JIT compilers interact with the JVM or Java Virtual Machine at runtime and compile suitable bytecode sequences into native machine code. So it helps faster execute the code. JIT compiler helps JVM to execute the code faster. How it does? Whenever there is a code which has been repeatedly coming for execution, JIT compiler will compile that particular instruction and then store it in the memory. And by storing in the memory, there is no more need for recompiling that instruction if it comes again. And this is how, by using the memory, JIT compiler is able to execute the code or instruction faster. Now, need for JIT compiler. A JIT compiler can make relatively simple optimizations when compiling bytecode into native machine language. If compiling did not require any processor time or memory usage, the speed of a native compiler and that of a Java compiler would be the same. So we see when there is no compilation required, therefore there will be no difference in the time or the speed. JIT compilation requires processor time and memory usage. As we have seen that it stores the instruction after compilation in the memory. So therefore it requires processor time and memory usage. When the Java virtual memory first starts up, thousands of methods are invoked. compiling all these methods can significantly affect startup time, even if the end result is very good performance optimization. So therefore it will take memory and it will take processor time. Now let us move on to the next topic, that is advantages and disadvantages of JIT compiler. So the advantages, let us go through them first. JIT compilers need less memory usage. JIT compilers run after a program starts. Now just we know by the name that JIT compiler means just in time compiler. So it will start after a program has been started. Code optimization can be done while the coding is running. So when the code is being run, that time only the code optimization can be done. Any page faults can be reduced, that is a benefit. Code that is used together will be localized on the same page. The JIT compiler can utilize different levels of optimization. So these are the advantages of JIT compiler. Now let us go through the disadvantages. Startup time can take a noticeable amount of time. So this is a disadvantage, that it will take more time because there is a startup time required. Then second disadvantage, heavy usage of cache memory. Because the JIT compiler will be storing the instruction after compiling them in the memory, therefore to refer them quickly there is a greater requirement or greater usage of cache memory. Thirdly, the disadvantage is increases the level of complexity in a Java program. So it does make it faster, but it also increases the complexity of the Java program. So that was my presentation. Thank you, sir, for your kind attention.